here's my loaded question.
Yeah, I agree fully right off the hop. I do think that there is a huge opportunity in really, the idea of it being WooCommerce, or really just leaning into the idea of commerce-enabled WordPress more fully, I think is something that I would love to see come out of Automatic specifically, where, ultimately WordPress touches 40% of the internet, whatever number, we're floating around. And there's really no reason that needs to be gated behind a separate layer. It's a separate concept. And, Automatic owns them both, one way or another, right? And WooCommerce is also an open source project. Why does it need this sort of arbitrary separation? My theory is that there's this sort of like unapologetic commercial aspect to WooCommerce that WordPress sort of is and isn't. It is obviously, there's billions of dollars floating around. It's a commercial entity regardless. But, WordPress still theoretically, the democratizing publishing, it is literally free for normal people. That feels a little at odds with something that, is monetized best by payments. That's sort of maybe I don't know. I don't know, Matt's thinking behind it, obviously, but I think that there is something sort of at odds there that might make sort of the mission-based thing a little more complicated. I don't know why, though. I don't know why I don't think it needs to be. And I think WooCommerce has a lot more potential.
I do feel like they are trending in it. I mean, I probably covered this when it was announced, but I think like new marketing manager, or at least I feel like the marketing has been amplified, especially since Brian. I mean, just probably why like they hired Brian and like had a little bit more push towards seeing more updates. And I just went on a rant on this yesterday in an episode that I published on the channel, where it's just like WordPress needs that product person, WordPress and arguably WooCommerce, that product person where, Apple's a bad example because it's Apple, right? Let me pass it to you to talk about iOS. And it's just like, there's all these owners that represent that product. And like, that's what, for lack of a better phrase, that's what I want to see at Automatic. And I'm just like, man, you can't do that mentally. And number one, like, give somebody the responsibility to lead this thing, and let's incentivize and set the goals for that and vision for that person. So
yeah, I have two or three. Number one, the new marketing coming out of WooCommerce is better than anything they've ever done. It is by far well above and beyond any attempt they've made in the past to really get out there. It does a very good job of showing, the ways WooCommerce is better at that high end for businesses that are serious about, UX and customer experience, and, not just being just another one of those Shopify stores. And it's all great, but that kind of gets to that problem where I said, Woo's always going to win that very bottom. They're going to continue to be great at the top, and they're embracing that. But who's responsible for the middle? All of the WordPress people, and, the stuff like, what we worked on with GoDaddy with managed WooCommerce stores, trying to build like a $100 a month all-in-one WooCommerce solution. And, I don't think anyone's really running with that ball at all right now. And I think that's a big missed opportunity. And like our team, we're small. We're going to keep doing what we can to enable that for everyone around in that area. But ultimately, unless WooCommerce really fully embraces that, I just don't know.
Some folks saying, oh my God, will we need plugins anymore? I'll just use this. Is that an existential threat to product businesses around WordPress?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where every prediction is going to be wrong. So I'm just going to share what I genuinely believe. And when I listen to that, I mean, the thing that I've been saying, and I tweet this like twice a day as this topic comes up, the code was always a commodity, right? So, I don't think that on its own is an existential threat. It's very novel. It's fun. It's surprising how good it actually is. And the best use cases I've seen for it are the funny, goofy things that you would never actually bother building otherwise. Again, to tie it back to, what I said about Checkout WC, you buy that product 6 months from now rather than 6 months ago, it will do better at the thing it's for. And, that rapid improvement, you could argue maybe AI will eventually do that too. But, we're not even quite at the point where it can actually build the functional thing for you on its own yet. Then one more point on that. Agencies want to hand off the responsibility. They don't want to have to handle 100% of all of it if they can avoid it in a cost-effective way. And even if the code did work, I think that would still matter.
Yeah. So in this case, you're saying like, oh, in that agency / like plugin product relationship, you know, well, use your products or Gravity Forms products. It's like, I'm an agency. I'm trusting that this piece of software is going to do the thing that it says it's going to do. And if it doesn't, and if there's a bug, I'll knock on the door because that's my right. I bought a license. I say, please support me, you know, and you know, wait for the plugin company to support them as best as possible. So it's like offsetting that risk, basically.
Yeah, and honestly, as AI gets better, our support will just keep getting even better, because that'll be how we differentiate. And I'm actually fine with that.
Like, I am still kind of in the middle of like, is this thing really going to change the workforce as much as people are saying? Because my God, it's not getting anything right that I've been, you know, working with it to do. And I'm just looking around at everybody saying, well, we're all doomed, cutting 30,000 staff and everyone's going to be out of a job. And I'm going, this thing can't even draw a picture that I've been prompting it to do for a half an hour. But back to the telex, you know, just working with some examples. What's surprising is it's just not using core WordPress blocks to solve the problems. And I would have thought that the first AI tool coming out of Automatic would have clearly done that. So it's like, cool, but also this is not a standards. And I would have imagined that training data with Gutenberg would have been able to nail this out of the park right out of the gate. So it makes me kind of worry a little bit. Like, is this thing really trained, or is it more like in, you know, confining itself into saying like, just make it a block and that's your only mission?
I think that's part of where the novelty comes from in a lot of ways, though, right? It's not constrained is part of why, you know, I think someone made Snake and posted that on Twitter. I think that being the fun of it is part of the thing that's most interesting about it, though. And, you know, while to make it a tool to replace plugins, I think it definitely needs to actually adhere to constraints and best practices in ways that, counter argument, a lot of plugin companies don't, you know. That being said, if AI is able to fulfill the magic, the thing that everyone's warning us is going to happen, those constraints may become irrelevant, right? The people who are buying Shopify over WooCommerce care 0%. They don't, they're not checking. It might not matter in the long run. Still do think, though, that, you know, if the goal is to make things that are maintainable, sustainable over the long term, that the tools are nowhere close today. They're much more impressive than I would have imagined a year ago. But I think that's why I'm skeptical. That's why I'm worried, is I thought it was all nonsense a year ago. And now I'm sort of like, you know, maybe it's not there yet, is my current stance. I thought it was all nonsense. I was a lot more confident, I would say. Quick example is we do have a lot of feature plugins on WooCommerce.com. And I think realistically, there's some of those you probably could whip something up in Claude that does it, and it'd probably be just fine, you know. And that's some of those lower end products that, you know, they're one feature. They're very simple. They aren't doing a whole lot. I think those ones are probably legitimately at risk. I'm fine with that. You know, we'll continue maintaining our version of that and make sure it's sort of ideally the best one. If you do want to offload the responsibility, pay for support, you have a tool that can do that. But, you know, you look at something like Checkout WC, Constellation, rental products. If you're going to go use AI for that today, you know, good luck. I hope you have fun. We'll be here when you change your mind. You know, I find that I'm very skeptical that those like products that meaningfully improve every month are going to be seeing serious competition from AI over the next, you know, even 3, 4, 5 years.